Telescope viewers, welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, retired Ambassador Selim Kuneralp will be joining us to evaluate developments in Turkey's foreign policy, Turkey's efforts to normalize ties with Egypt, as well as end its diplomatic isolation, generally speaking. But first, let's take a look at the coronavirus-related developments of the week. According to the data released by the Ministry of Health, as of May 6th, the total number of cases has reached 4,977,982, and the death toll has become 42,187. On May 4th, the Turkish Ministry of Interior issued a circular to all 81 governorships in the nation regarding the measures that markets need to take during the ongoing national lockdown. The circular announced that the products that do not count as basic necessities are prohibited from being sold during the course of the lockdown.
Along with the circular issued by the Ministry of Interior, any products that do not count as basic necessities are prohibited from being sold in chains and supermarkets starting from May 7th until May 17th. The Interior Ministry announced that the reason behind this measure is to prevent the possible huddle inside the markets. According to the circular, markets will only be allowed to sell cleaning products, cosmetic products, and animal food, in addition to staple food. Here's the list of products that are prohibited to sell by the Ministry of Interior: perfumery and makeup products, electronic appliances, stationery supplies, clothing and accessories, home textiles, auto accessories, gardening supplies, hardware, and glassware. The controversy over banning the sale of alcohol has been a national debate since April 29, when the national lockdown started. Even though the alcohol ban had been announced at the beginning of the national lockdown, it was not included in the written circular, prompting many to argue that it was unconstitutional. The ban on alcoholic beverages was mentioned in writing in the circular this time. Nonetheless, this circular created nationwide confusion on what can be sold, when it can be sold, and who can sell it. While the public could not figure out where they could buy which products at what time, the storekeepers were also left in confusion on what they were allowed to sell. Professor Dr. Metin Günday spoke to Medyascope on the lack of legal basis surrounding the ban imposed by the government. These measures do not hold any legal base. No ban can be brought without legislation. Even if they passed a law that bans the consumption of alcoholic beverages, this law itself would also be against the Constitution. The Constitution's second article of its 58th clause states that the government takes necessary measures to protect youth from alcoholic addiction, and this is regulated through the national drinking age being 18. However, the ban on the sale of alcohol, even if it were to be done through legislation, would be against this purpose, and thus would be violating the 13th clause of the Constitution.
Another controversial circular has been issued on April 30th by Turkey's General Directorate of Security that bans all audiovisual recordings of citizens and police at protests. This has been evaluated as a further blow to press freedom in Turkey.
Turkey's Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu has defended the ban, claiming that its purpose is to protect the privacy of individuals. There is no breach of the Constitution or of democracy, he insisted. It will supposedly also prevent the police from being distracted while performing their duties. However, experts warn that the ban is unlawful and will threaten citizens' rights by weakening police accountability and preventing evidence collection, especially in cases where police commit violence against demonstrators. The circular was also criticized by main opposition Republicans People's Party chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who said on May 1st, "This circular means democracy has been suspended in Turkey. The Constitution has been suspended. Rights and freedoms have been suspended."
A Turkish delegation has visited Egypt between May 5th and 6th to hold talks under the aim of normalizing ties between the two countries after an 8-year rift. The foreign ministries of both countries said on May 6th that their delegations held frank and in-depth talks, adding that the two sides will evaluate the outcome of this round of consultations and agree on the next steps to be taken.
According to a written statement by the Turkish Foreign Ministry published on May 4th, Egyptian and Turkish officials met in Egypt's capital Cairo on May 5th for exploratory discussion to normalize ties. These exploratory discussions will focus on necessary steps that may lead towards the normalization of relations between the two countries bilaterally and in the regional context, the Foreign Ministry said. Political consultations between the countries were chaired by the Deputy Foreign Minister Sedat Önal and his Egyptian counterpart Hamdi Sanad Loza. Egypt and Turkey have been in dispute since 2013, when Abdel Fattah al-Sisi staged a military coup that took down Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi. Turkey slammed el-Sisi for staging a coup to overthrow the government. El-Sisi became the first president of Egypt in 2014 and took a harsh stance against Turkey. Egypt expelled Turkey's ambassador, which resulted in Turkey to downgrade relations. Over the course of 8 years of animosity, the two countries also sparred over a range of other issues, including the war in Libya, where they backed rival sides, and maritime disputes in the eastern Mediterranean. In 2019, Turkey signed a deal with Libya that aimed to boost Turkish maritime rights and influence in the eastern Mediterranean region. This angered the regional countries, including Egypt, and they responded by signing a separate deal with Greece to delineate their maritime boundaries. Turkey and Egypt started to normalize their ties last year, through dialogue formed by the intelligence services of the respective countries. Egypt recently announced their recognition of the exclusive economic zone in the eastern Mediterranean region, a zone demarcated by Turkey that claims the limits of their maritime boundaries. Egypt's recognition was welcomed by Turkey. Since then, the two countries have been exchanging positive signals on forming a dialogue and holding talks on demarcating their maritime borders in the eastern Mediterranean. On March 12th, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that the two countries held intelligence, diplomatic, and economic contacts, adding that he hoped for strong ties between the two nations. In accordance, Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu has said that Turkey might negotiate a maritime demarcation agreement with Egypt in the eastern Mediterranean. Çavuşoğlu had made a phone call with Egyptian Foreign Minister Sami Shokri in recent weeks. Çavuşoğlu also stressed that Turkey and Egypt may exchange ambassadors in the coming period.
This evening, our guest is retired Ambassador Selim Kuneralp. Mr. Kuneralp was the Turkish ambassador to South Korea and Sweden, and the Deputy Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, Director General for Policy Planning, and Director General for the European Union. Moreover, Mr. Kuneralp also held the positions of Deputy Secretary General of the International Energy Center, head of the Permanent Delegation of Turkey to the World Trade Organization, and head of the Permanent Delegation of Turkey to the European Union. Mr. Kuneralp is joining us to speak about developments in Turkey's foreign policy, particularly its recent efforts to normalize ties with Egypt. Hello, Ambassador Kuneralp. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, Shirin. Thank you for inviting me.
So the relations between Egypt and Turkey have been strained since 2013 when Sisi led the army coup that toppled the Muslim Brotherhood President Morsi. Now, since Wednesday, talks have been underway to bridge this 8-year rift, marking a sharp U-turn for Turkey. What, in your opinion, prompted this change?
I think that the reason why President Erdogan has felt the need to restart the dialogue with Egypt is the sense of isolation in which Turkey finds itself, not just in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, but also elsewhere, and we may come back to that later. So he has made this concerted attempt to restore links with all sorts of countries. And in the region, of course, Turkey and Egypt are the principal, the biggest countries in terms of population and power and influence. And of course, there were many areas where they needed to talk to each other. In Libya, for instance, last year, they almost came to blows because Turkey and Egypt were supporting the two rival powers in the country, and that almost came to a fight between Turkey and Egypt directly. So there was a need to avoid this kind of thing and try to restore relations, particularly as Turkey is losing ground in the Eastern Mediterranean. There are all sorts of efforts made at exploring for and exploiting the resources, the hydrocarbon resources of the Eastern Mediterranean. And at least as important as that, you have the beginnings of institutions appearing in the Eastern Mediterranean. There is something called the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, which started as a forum, as a talking shop, but has now become an international organization. It's got practically every country in the region except Turkey, and also Italy and France from outside the region. So, and companies are also involved, Total and Eni and so on, and maybe some more. And Turkey felt terribly left out of this whole process. So I think that these are the main motivations for trying to restore relations with Egypt. But of course, it's not going to be that easy. And if we come to that, the reason why relations have broken off is, as you indicated yourself, because Turkey did not accept the removal of President Morsi by General Sisi, which it saw as a military coup, and because of this very dogmatic support for the Muslim Brotherhood, which of course is where Mr. Morsi originated from, it found itself taking sides in the domestic affairs of Egypt, and it went further. Many of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt have taken refuge in Turkey. They have started broadcasting from Turkey, which of course was a source of irritation to Egypt. And so now, this dialogue started. It has been presented as exploratory talks, which of course indicated that there was no real negotiation. The two sides expressed their views and their expectations of each other. And in the press release that came out last night, it was simply said that this was a very cordial discussion, and that the discussions will continue to see how relations can be normalized. So there was no decision taken yesterday to normalize relations. Presumably, Egypt has put forward its demands on Turkey, and of course, the delegation that went to Cairo will report and transmit the expectations of the Egyptian side to the Turkish authorities, and we will see whether any concrete steps are taken as a result of these demands.
Yes, you mentioned some of the main areas where the relations were problematic, mainly the Eastern Mediterranean, as well as Turkey's kind of warm embrace of the Muslim Brotherhood. So, in light of yesterday's talk, which they said were, the discussions were frank and in depth, and there seems to be kind of this positive outcome of the talks. But what are some of perhaps the concrete steps that Egypt would expect Turkey to take to ameliorate the relationships? And is it realistic for us, in light of the past 8 years, to expect Turkey to actually take these steps? Can Turkey take these steps that Egypt might expect from it?
Well, that is the $64,000 question, as they say. The steps that are required, and I presume that they concern Libya. The Egyptians must have asked Turkey to withdraw its troops from Libya, not just the mercenaries, but the troops that are stationed there. And with respect to the Muslim Brotherhood, they must have asked not just for the broadcast to be ended, which I think is already happening. I'm not in a position to follow, the broadcasts of the Egyptian Brotherhood from Istanbul, but I hear that they may have been at least curtailed and perhaps completely ended. They are also probably asking for the members of the Brotherhood which have taken refuge in Istanbul to be either expelled from Turkey to a third country, or better, to be sent back to Egypt. And of course, these are very difficult things to do for Mr. Erdogan. He has a a sort of a dogmatic ideological affinity with the Muslim Brotherhood, and turning his back on them would be rather painful also from the perspective of the base of the party, which might not like it very much. But at the same time, you see that he's making efforts at restoring relations with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is most likely going to ask for the same kind of thing, because the Saudis have a dislike of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the same as Egypt's. And the United Arab Emirates also, though I do not hear that attempts are being made to mend bridges with the United Arab Emirates. Maybe that will come in its time. But so in summary, you know, the price that Mr. Erdogan would have to pay for restoring relations with the main countries in the Arab world, namely Egypt and Saudi Arabia, is extremely high from the perspective of his domestic base. So we don't know. I don't know whether he's going to be able to pay that price.
I mean, you mentioned that, yes, that Erdogan's government is trying to mend ties with several countries in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia and potentially the UAE. But it's not only in relation to the Middle East, but we've also seen kind of Turkey searching for ways to bridge estranged relationships elsewhere as well, both in the EU. There were talks with Greece as well, the United States, and so forth. And you recently penned an article where you underlined that Turkey's foreign policy in recent years has been lacking kind of balance and was not realistic. So do you think that the current attempts to bridge these estranged relationships, an attempt to find a balance where Turkey would no longer be diplomatically isolated?
Well, there's certainly an attempt being made at restoring dialogue and a sort of a civilized relationship with the United States and Europe. So you can see, for instance, that the language used by Mr. Erdogan when talking to or of his European counterparts has changed. You know, he doesn't insult them anymore as he did with Mrs. Merkel and President Macron only recently. And with the United States, even after President Biden recognized the genocide allegations concerning Armenian, what's the word that I should choose? To be,
the 1915.
Yeah, the 1915 events. That is the vocabulary, the terminology used in Turkey. But concerning the allegations of genocide in relation to these events, President Erdogan has taken a very subdued tone, and no retaliatory action has been taken against the United States, despite expectations that this would be the case. And similarly with Europe, he has sent his foreign minister, to Berlin yesterday, and he has had a telephone conversation with Mrs. Merkel, and of course the foreign minister of Greece was in Istanbul, or in Ankara a few weeks ago. Then you had this attempt at finding a settlement to the Cyprus problem, but in each of these conversations, he is faced with the request for concrete steps, action. Because there is no, one has to say it, there is no confidence, trust in his word anymore in Europe. They want concrete action. And Mrs. Merkel, and as I understand, the German foreign minister yesterday in Berlin, have both been asking for the Turkish troops to be withdrawn from Libya, for instance. You know? When the leaders of the European Union came for this famous Sofagate meeting in Ankara earlier this last month, they were very open in saying that you could not have progress in the relationship between Turkey and the European Union unless something was done on Cyprus, and unless Turkey decided to treat Cyprus as an ordinary member of the European Union, which means recognizing it, which means applying the customs union to it, which are things that Turkey has refused to do all along. And this message was given at the very highest possible level, despite the protocol sort of problem that arose. But despite that, when these Cyprus talks were held in Geneva just a few weeks later, the opposite has been done. Turkey has come up with an even more intransigent position on Cyprus than has anything that has been seen before. Namely, it asked for the sovereignty of Northern Cyprus to be recognized, which is something that has been rejected by the United Nations Security Council more than almost 40 years ago in the 1980s, and was bound to upset not just the European Union, but everyone else. And the same day, for instance, the United States and Russia and the Secretary General of the United Nations have come out rejecting this latest move by Turkey. So, Mr. Erdogan seems to be making attempts at establishing dialogue, but there is no concrete action. And in the absence of concrete action in the direction that is expected by his counterparts, progress is, to my mind, quite impossible. And we're probably going to see at the June summit of the European Union something emerging in terms of signs of displeasure. I don't know whether they will come to adopt new sanctions against Turkey. That is not likely unless something is done in the Eastern Mediterranean. But there will be no progress in the directions that Turkey is hoping for, namely modernizing the customs union, that kind of thing. So, he needs to put actions before words, to be believed and to be to be able to restore a minimum of confidence in him, and that is going to take a lot of time. And I don't know whether in any of these areas that we have mentioned, he has the will to do these things.
Yes, so there is this supposed good intention that is verbalized, but these needs to be actually translated into concrete steps in order to restore a confidence which has been, bruised in this lengthy process. But many also,
that's exactly it.
Many also, believe, despite these good intentions to the exterior, kind of in the international arena and in terms of the diplomatic steps being taken, many also believe that essentially these efforts to normalize the diplomatic ties has to do with domestic politics, that if Turkey behaves in the international arena, foreign countries would stop kind of criticizing Turkey's breach of human rights, freedom of speech, the state of law, as well as the economic turmoil that we're in. Do you agree? What relationships do you see between these attempts in diplomacy with what's been going on domestically?
Well, I don't think that Egypt is particularly concerned about human rights in Turkey, considering that, after all, the Sisi regime is a dictatorship, and this record is probably worse than that of Turkey at the moment. But that certainly would require, I mean, let's say that the Americans and the Europeans are not going to change their criticism of Turkey for its human rights policy simply on the grounds of progress in foreign relations. These are two essential elements of the relationship, particularly with Europe. One cannot go without the other, or let's say that foreign policy dialogue will not discourage them from continuing with their criticism of human rights record in Turkey. So I don't think that you can link the two in that way. But perhaps more importantly than that, of course, is what you have also mentioned, the economic situation in Turkey, which is very serious and which requires a continuous inflow of capital from abroad. And this capital, of course, has to come from the West and essentially from Europe. And now that the relationship with Europe and the United States has soured, or at least that is the perception that people have abroad, inflows of capital are also shrinking. And of course, they're not shrinking just because the political situation, the political relationship with the West is bad. They also look at the domestic outlook, the state of the Turkish economy, the collapse of the state of law, and that kind of thing. That, of course, also discourages them from investing in Turkey. But the absence of political dialogue is also a factor. So if improvements can be made in that direction, and Turkey can go back to a more civilized relationship with Europe, it would have certainly an impact on the decisions of potential investors. But there again, concrete action is what is going to be required.
Ambassador Selim Kuneralp, thank you so much for having joined us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
On May 4th, an investigation was opened against Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu by the Interior Ministry for walking with his hands folded behind his back while visiting the Ottoman Sultan Mehmet II's mausoleum in 2020.
The Interior Ministry started this investigation against İmamoğlu because they say that his hands being folded behind his back is a sign of disrespect to the Sultan. The footage of İmamoğlu walking as such is from last year's anniversary of Istanbul's conquest. Regarding the investigation, İmamoğlu commented that, "Are we going to file a criminal complaint when we see someone who's walking with his hands behind his back from now on? This is the mind of these public administrators. Fighting Ekrem İmamoğlu became their national sport. It is all they care about." The reason behind İmamoğlu's investigation drew many reactions on social media platforms, humorously criticizing the subject of investigation. Supporters of İmamoğlu curated posts like, "An investigation has been opened against İmamoğlu by the Interior Ministry for detecting that he has eyebrows on top of his eyes. An investigation is opened against İmamoğlu, who stole the dog's food. An investigation was opened against Ekrem İmamoğlu for taking off his jacket." Referring to the social media reactions, İmamoğlu said, "We are encountering funny things, and apparently it'll continue. Our nation burst into laughter and has made fun of those who took this decision." A comment from the ruling Justice and Development Party's Group Deputy Chairman Bülent Turan regarding İmamoğlu's investigation contradicted the party's stance on the issue. "It is not our concern where he put his hands. I think this was an unnecessary step to be taken. Everyone knows who İmamoğlu is. I think this is a pointless topic," Turan said, expressing his dissidence to AKP's decision. İmamoğlu is being probed for yet another visit he made back in 2019, this time to former HDP mayors who were dismissed by the Interior Ministry over having terror-related charges. İmamoğlu's visit was a symbol of his solidarity with the HDP mayors who had been replaced with government-appointed trustees even though they had won their elections in 2019. İmamoğlu's visit was subjected to an investigation for praising a crime and criminals by the Interior Ministry.
On May 5th, the ruling Justice and Development Party shared a 3-minute-long animation called Lie Generation Center from its official Twitter account. The animation is a mockery of the main opposition People's Republican Party chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu and the party's spokesperson Faruk Öztrak. The opposition's reaction to the animation was more humorous than it was condemning.
In the AKP animation that caricatured the CHP chair Kılıçdaroğlu and the CHP spokesperson Fatih Öztrak, the main opposition's headquarters building was referred to as the Lie Generation Center. The animation's plot is around the idea that CHP's headquarters is actually a lie generation center that constantly generates lies about the ruling AKP. The crazy scientist who works in the Lie Generation Center shows Kılıçdaroğlu and Öztrak his latest lie generation machines that create lies that range from low, medium to high. At the end of the video, the crazy scientist says, "We have already listed the best lies we have generated." That quote is followed by 2 lists that are separated as the truths and the lies. Under the list of lies, there are statements like, "Government has sold the factories," "The COVID-19 patients brought to Turkey are related to the health minister," and "Where is the $128 billion that has been on the top of the opposition's political agenda?" Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır commented on the following regarding AKP's mocking animation. "Here's what I know. The most basic principle in media, propaganda, and advertisement is this. The second you mention your rival's name, it means you're making an advertisement for them. This video seems like a CHP and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu propaganda that has been made with the opportunities of the AKP. It is a video that helps their claim against the opposition to spread to a wider segment of people. This video was not necessary for those who already view CHP and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu as a liar. But will there be some people in Turkey who would say, wow, everything that CHP has been saying was a lie after watching this video? Frankly, I'm not so sure.
Editor-in-Chief Kürşat Oğuz and Ankara Representative Bülent Aydemir have resigned from their posts at Habertürk TV channel after a broadcast covering government ally Nationalist Movement Party's draft constitutional proposal was targeted by the top MHP politicians.
The resignation of Oğuz and Aydemir came shortly after TV anchor Ebru Baki was targeted by Nationalist Movement Party's Vice Chair İzzet Ülvi Yönter following a live broadcast where Baki discussed the new draft constitution of the party. Yönter tweeted on May 4th that anchor Ebru Baki had lost it over MHP's draft constitution and that her attempts to defame the draft proposal was vulgar and crude. Ebru Baki is a supposed journalist who warps truths and reveals her intolerance of the MHP with her smirk. It's absolutely rancid that she picked her guests among MHP enemies. They chose filth and atrocity, the tweet read. Baki's co-anchor and Habertürk TV Ankara representative Bülent Aydemir responded to Yönter's comments during the program's live broadcast on May 5th, criticizing the criticism of Baki and the targeting of journalists by the MHP. Shortly after, it was reported that Aydemir had resigned, being replaced by the Show TV Ankara representative Sibel Demirci Erdem. Additionally, the show that he had co-anchored with Baki was shortened by 1 hour on May 6th. This is not the first time critics of the MHP have been targeted by party members. Most recently, journalist Levent Gültekin was assaulted by a mob of people following his criticism of MHP founder Alparslan Türkeş, prompting an immediate backlash from the MHP and a verbal attack by MHP deputy leader Semih Yalçın.
Members of the Forkhan Foundation, an Islamic foundation critical of the Justice and Development Party, were dispersed with tear gas by the Turkish police while they were praying at a mosque in the southeastern province of Gaziantep.
After the police intervention to worshippers on May 3rd, the foundation said that they were abiding by COVID-19 measures by putting on their masks and maintaining social distancing. Alparslan Kuytul, the head of the foundation who served time in prison over politically motivated charges, previously said that he would insist on praying at the mosque. The foundation slammed police intervention to the prayers and the detentions of its members. Those who allow people to gather in stadiums, public transportation, and factories despite the full lockdown have prevented a small group from worshipping at a mosque, the foundation stated. The Forkhan Foundation has been under government pressure for years due to its critical statements. Evaluating the government's relation with the Forkhan Foundation, Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır has stated, the Forkhan Foundation and its leader Alparslan Kuytul are really forcing President Erdogan's hand. The situation that developed with the Gülenists was a different one. Here, they are faced with a classic Islamist structure. Its leader has studied theology and has a lot of followers. This is a local movement having started in Adana, but which has later spread across the country, as well as some supporters in Europe. This is a new movement, and one of its biggest characteristics is that the organization does not accept to depend on Erdogan and have put a distance between themselves and the government, criticizing the government at times as well. They also do not seem to be open to bargaining and have thus had problems with the government since 2017. So apparently, Islamist groups in Turkey can still be targeted if they do not fall in line with Erdogan. And because they are vocal about their objections, Erdogan has to respond and can no longer ignore them because they question his absolute authority, at least in Islamic circles. Hence the intervention to the prayer of the worshippers in Gaziantep. The Forkhan Foundation does not look like it will step back in the face of this targeting, which will continue to be a problem for Erdogan.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.